All right, man. Peace. You know, brothers, former NBA great Isiah Thomas is not known for mincing his words. And once again, he's going to show his forthrightness when he's asked to break down and evaluate Mr. Karl Anthony Towns in the aftermath of him signing the 5-year, $190 million extension with the Minnesota Timberwolves. He's going to reiterate a sentiment that I've touched on numerous times on this channel and that many other people have touched on. That is the notion that there are levels to everything. And in the process of Isiah Thomas establishing that notion that there are levels to everything, he's basically also going to give you a very realistic appraisal of Mr. Karl Anthony Towns, what he is, and what he thinks his ceiling is going to be. Now, certain people may consider what Isiah Thomas has to say about Karl Anthony Towns relatively quote-unquote harsh. I don't. I just think that he kept it real. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
I want to go back to something, Zeke, you said earlier. You said you both used to being number ones, having that onus, that responsibility. Even if Jimmy Butler wasn't supposed to necessarily be that guy, that's the way he was looked because he was a Tibbs guy, an all-star, somebody coming to the team, and it allowed Karl Anthony Towns to step back a little bit. We saw games where he only took 8-9 shots going into the playoffs down the stretch. Now he's got a big contract. Now Jimmy Butler's going to go. All of a sudden, the target's on him. He's the guy. Is he ready for that?
Well, I'm going to talk real talk.
Yeah.
You know, it's different levels to being number one, right? Like Durant, LeBron James, those are number ones, okay?
I would throw Steph Curry in there also, but go ahead.
Now, some guys get the title of being the number one because you got the contract, you got the money, but really you ain't at that level, right? Now, can you get...
Right, but what that contract does do is it puts the onus on the player who gets the contract to understand that if you're not able to attain to the level of a LeBron James, of a Kevin Durant, that you're going to be put under an excessive amount of scrutiny, so you better be able to deal with that as well.
You get to that level through hard work? Probably not.
Now, did you hear what Isiah Thomas just stated about Karl Anthony Towns? He said, can you get to the level of a Kevin Durant or a LeBron James even with hard work? Probably not. Let me rewind this back.
LeBron James, those are number ones, okay? Now, some guys get the title of being the number one because you got the contract, you got the money, but really you ain't at that level, right? Now, can you get to that level through hard work? Probably not. You never going to get to LeBron James level or Kevin Durant. Just keeping it 100, right?
Sure.
Now, you got the title of being number one. Now, can you lift your team up? And you got the salary of being number one, but are you really a number one on their level?
Now, brothers, as we can see, Isiah Thomas is not mentioning his words. But I believe that the reason why, well, there's a couple of reasons why he's getting at Karl Anthony Towns like this. Number one, he saw the same thing that I saw from Karl Anthony Towns in his first playoff performance. That is a person who could be punked out there on the basketball floor when the going gets tough. When it becomes very feverish on that basketball floor during the playoffs, certain people are going to step to the forefront and certain others are going to step to the background. Karl Anthony Towns tried to step to the background because had he shown up and been more aggressive, they may have been able to win one more game. Who knows? But I think that there were quite a few factors that went into why Karl Anthony Towns did not perform quite as well as he could have. Not just his own hesitancy. I also think that he was frustrated with the game plan of his coach, Tom Thibodeau. That's why I've been stating since last season that it's very clear that there are some issues, or that there were some issues between Karl Anthony Towns and Tom Thibodeau. And that's also why I think that Tom Thibodeau is not long for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And that takes me to my next point. The next reason why I believe that Isiah Thomas is getting at Karl Anthony Towns in the way that he is the same reason why he got at Jimmy Butler. That is that they seem to be making the environment very difficult for Tom Thibodeau, and Isiah Thomas seems to be a very big fan of Tom Thibodeau.
No. So there are different levels to being number one, and that's where it gets kind of mixed up at in this league, and also with the fans and the general public.
How about on the floor, where we know number one defensively and offensively, Jimmy Butler could be that guy. Take the big shot for you, make the big play.
Wait, no. Not Durant.
No. I'm saying on this.
I agree with you, Isaiah Thomas. Jimmy Butler, he's not on that level. That's why I said about the both of them. They don't have a real alpha on that team. Jimmy Butler's 30 years old. At least when it comes to Karl Anthony Towns, we can say Karl Anthony Towns is not on that level, but at least we know about him that he's 21. So we can act as if he's not reached his ceiling yet.
On this team, for Minnesota now with him gone, that's the number one that Karl Anthony Towns becomes, right? Now isn't he the guy the rest of the team's going to look to?
And you know, for Karl Anthony Towns, this has become very public. So he has to deliver now.
Absolutely, he definitely does. There's a lot of pressure on Karl Anthony Towns this season. Not only is he going to have to put up big numbers, but they're going to have to make the playoffs in order for him to make a lot of these sentiments that are growing about him go away. Because if the Minnesota Timberwolves come out this season and he has this big contract and they go 31-51 and Jimmy Butler ends up in Miami somewhere and they win 47, 48 games, we already know what the storyline is going to be. Karl Anthony Towns is soft, and there's not going to be much that he can do to refute that, especially since the second most talented player on the team, Andrew Wiggins, is even softer than him.
You know, assuming Butler is moved, they move forward. You know, they can't take a step back in terms of production. You know, if that happens, then you know obviously it's on Towns, and so you know he's been in the league for some time now. Obviously he's paid a lot of money. He's gotten better.
And Towns had great numbers last year: 21 points a game, almost 55% from the field, over 12 rebounds a game. So we know he gets in to get those rebounds. He's just going to have to step it up should they make the playoffs. He's going to have some really trademark games this year. I believe that he's going to have probably at least 8 or 9 40-point games this year for them to make it to the playoffs if they don't have Jimmy Butler or anybody else really to replace him.
Gotten better, but there is a bigger responsibility that comes with not just being the leading scorer, but being the guy that's responsible for this team's success. And he hasn't really had that responsibility. He's been able to sort of, you know, early on they were young. He was a young player with Levine and Wiggins, and then you bring in Butler, and obviously there's a step up in terms of production overall as a team. But now it's on his shoulders. And is he ready for that responsibility? Time will tell.
Griff, in a situation like this, does management, not just Tibbs as the coach, but as the president of baseball ops, GM, owner, do they communicate
or
that?
even basketball ops?
Right, or yeah. Join us Wednesday on TBS for the Pelican game.
You want the glasses? It makes you look a lot smarter.
I hate you. Do you usually communicate that to the player?
Yeah, so I really think where they're at, and it's funny for me to see it because Tibbs is saying, yes, we're very excited. He's giving us Bill Belichick, we're very, very excited. I think what's really difficult in this circumstance, and from a front office perspective, you're really aware of this. We talked about Miami earlier and what culturally their identity is. UD and Dwayne Wade have been that. The San Antonio Spurs are going to be without, for the first time in 21 years, all of Duncan, Manu, and Tony Parker. So who carries forward when the young kids are there? Who teaches that culture to the next generation? Well, when you're one of those teams and it's going good, you bring a young kid in, you indoctrinate them into what you do. What Tibbs and Jimmy Butler did landed on Karl Anthony Towns.
I agree. And I stated much of what Mr. David Griffin is stating right here last season. It was very obvious to me that Jimmy Butler and Tom Thibodeau, they were working hand in hand with one another to try to bring the old Bulls culture into the Minnesota Timberwolves locker room. And that culture just was not going to work because it was at its best back in 2011, and the NBA has changed so much just in the last 7 seasons. It's so much more of an offensive league now than it was just back in 2011. And that's why I never thought that the Tom Thibodeau hiring was a good hiring. Because to me, once again, he's a great defensive coach masquerading as a head coach. And he does not really know how to communicate with the players. At least not this generation of players.
He was already there. And he wasn't about that. That's not his game. That's not the way he operates. You said it when we were off the air about the young generation.
Sam Mitchell had done a great job.
Oh, I get it.
I mean, with Levine, with Towns, and Wiggins.
Well, I will put great in quotation marks, Isaiah Thomas. I don't believe that they ever made the playoffs with all 3 of those players there and Sam Mitchell coaching them. And Sam Mitchell, I mean, some of his coaching accolades, they're a bit dubious. I believe that he's won a Coach of the Year, but it's the same guy who allowed Kobe Bryant to pretty much be covered by one guy as he scored 81 points. I mean,
they were right on the cusp. I mean, and Flip. I mean, they had a nice culture. So
But he had a different
I
approach.
agree,
Yeah,
but he had
he
a
had
different
different
approach.
approach.
What made
Yeah.
Sam good was that Sam was really good with the young guys.
But he was hard on those guys. Sam wasn't. You know, Sam ain't easy.
But
We work with
I get
Sam,
it.
right?
I'm not saying anything.
Sam ain't an easy guy.
I
Right?
did too, and you're actually making
military background. You know, he was putting it down on those guys. So
and they liked what they were doing.
yeah.
So then you take these two guys who were very, very different in their approach. They're heavy, they're dark, they're grind. It's a different deal. Sam has a touch with guys that's a little bit different. He can make you laugh a little bit. He can make you look at yourself in a little bit different way. Balance, exactly. So those guys had a good thing
That's what
going,
I'm
and then they
doing.
landed this incredibly powerful culture on top of them. It wasn't designed for that. So again, we're making Jimmy out to be the culprit in this.
yes, I agree. I think that we're pretty much making Jimmy Butler out to be the culprit, but I don't think that he is the culprit. I never really thought that he was. What I do believe that he is and how he's viewed by others in the locker room is as Tom Thibodeau's spy, as his boy, as his sergeant in arms, the person who's there to make sure that they follow orders, and therefore they don't trust him. And then there's a big age gap there. And I think that people are truly underestimating that factor. Once again, Karl Anthony Towns is what, 21, maybe 22 years old? Wiggins is what, 23 years old? Jimmy Butler's 30. Once again, you cannot underestimate that they're at two different stages in their career. For regular people, there's not that much difference between 23 and 30, but with athletes, 7 years is almost like 25 years. It really is, because at 30 years old, you pretty much have reached your peak, your pinnacle. You should have made 4 or 5 all-star teams, and at that point, you're searching for championships. When you have players that are 23, 22 years old, like a Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, they're trying to make all-star teams. They're trying to lead the league in scoring. They're trying to make second team or first team All-NBA or maybe second team All-NBA defense. They're trying to get personal accolades, individual awards. So there's a big disparity there. And that's why it's dangerous to bring on a 30-year-old player in his prime at the stage of his career when he wants to win to team up with a bunch of young boys like that. Once again, that is why LeBron James did not want Andrew Wiggins on his team, no matter how talented he was, because he knew that he was there to win right now.
Tibbs is at least equal parts to blame for the way this has gone, because culturally they weren't addressing the fact that Minnesota did have kind of a good thing going to begin with. They didn't have to tear it all down necessarily from a cultural standpoint, but they did, and I think that was hard for Karl and for Wiggins.
Yeah,
I agree, sir.
the one thing that's going to be interesting with the pace in which they need to make this move, because of the distraction, can they make the right move? Because that's it, right? You got to do it quick. No?
Well, as of right now, they still have not moved Butler.
Well, you definitely have made the wrong move, right? Giving up again, Levine, marking it, done,
Yep.
right? When you give up those,
I'm not quite sure if that's the wrong move, Isaiah Thomas. I mean, we could say that, but it's very clear that Thibodeau was trying to bring a jolt into that locker room. He was trying to win right now. I think that he saw the locker room and he saw a bunch of young guys who really did not know how to win. They were more concerned with joking around and laughing together than they were with actual winning. And they played no defense whatsoever. They were a team with a lot of talent, and they were winning in the 30s. And in 1 year there, had Butler not missed all the time that he missed, they would have been a 50-win team, maybe a 50-plus win team. So that's what Thibodeau's looking at. Now, the issue that I have with Thibodeau is that, to me, he's not a championship-level coach. And Jimmy Butler is not an alpha on a championship-level team. So it's always an issue when your most talented player is not your alpha. And that's the case with Minnesota, because Karl Anthony Towns is their most talented player, but he's not the alpha.
give up those three pieces, and then for 58 to 60 games, you get Butler. And now you got to make another move, right? So if you're not careful, this move that you make could set you back, maybe 5 to 10 years, if not longer.
Well, I don't think that they can be set back 5 to 10 years if Karl Anthony Towns is as good as they're paying him to be. When you're paying somebody as much money as they're paying him, almost $40 million a year, there better not be a 5 to 10 year setback. That would be a major major indictment on Karl Anthony Towns.
Well, you talk about what's happened here, and certainly Tibbs, his style. I never felt his style really complimented the young pieces that they had.
Nor do I. I don't think that Tom Thibodeau's style complements any team in today's NBA.
And even the way they play, they need to be up and down the court using their athleticism.
I agree, and they need a couple of shooters.
Even back when Levine was there. But to go through something like this now, where you bring in your guy, you put your stamp of approval on Jimmy Butler. You bring him in, and in a year's time, he's demanding a trade. The question is, will Tibbs alter or adapt or adjust his style? Or can he? Does he know a different way?
Well, Grant Hill, that's the difference between a good coach and a great coach. A great coach always has a plan B, C, and D. They know how to adapt on the fly. That's pretty much what greatness is in any field of endeavor. How quickly and how well can you adapt?
But if not, this thing will implode, and I don't think it'll end well.
So I think it's really interesting. They have to win in the Western Conference, which is as good and as deep as it's ever been, without the presence of a defensive player who played when he was on the court. When Jimmy Butler was on the court, they were 105 in defensive rating. When he's off the court, they were 112 and change. They didn't stop anybody without Jimmy. So now Jimmy's going to be gone, and you have to win in the Western Conference. This is a tall order no matter what they get for Jimmy in this trade.
Yeah, but the good news is, let's be for real, the good news is they had no chance of winning a championship anyway. So they really should not be that hesitant to blow this up in regards to sending away Butler, because they were not going to win a chip anyway.
This trade doesn't sound distracting at all. I'm sure they'll be fine. We got a lot more.
I don't think that it'll be that big of a distraction if they keep things in its proper perspective. They were not going to win the championship anyway. They need to clean house. They need to change the coach. If I was their GM, I would change the coach. Well, can't do that because the coach is the GM. The owner's going to have to fire Tom Thibodeau and bring in a real coach and a real GM. I would get rid of Jeff Teague. If we're going to be young, let's be young. If we're going to be ready to win a championship, then let's make sure that we bring in a top flight player. The only player that I would bring in to be an alpha over Karl Anthony Towns will be a player on the level of a Kyrie Irving or of a Kevin Durant, somebody of that nature. Remember, Minnesota was one of the teams on Kyrie Irving's list of teams. So who knows? But anyway, peace.